In this lesson, I want to discuss why it's important to build small habits. So in chemistry, there's a concept known as activation energy. Basically, imagine that you have a match that's not yet lit. And if I just hold that match, nothing happens. But if I apply some energy to it, if I strike it against the side of the box, then the match goes from unlit to lit, fire sparks. But it only happens because of that energy that I provided, and that's called activation energy. It's the energy required to activate a reaction, to cause something to occur. Well, our habits are the same way. They have activation energies associated with them. But here's the thing, the bigger the habit, the bigger the activation energy. So for example, if you have a habit of wanting to do 100 push-ups a day, the activation energy for that might be quite high. If you have a habit of wanting to do 10 push-ups a day, the activation energy is much lower. And if you decide to just do one push-up each day, then the activation energy is very minimal. You could probably hop down and try to do one push-up just right now. So the idea here is that we want to reduce the activation energy required to get our habits kickstarted. If it requires a lot of energy to get things going, then it's going to be really difficult to get that habit to proceed. So the lower the activation energy, the more likely it is that you'll actually perform something rather than not perform it. Now, the way to think about this is by making your habit simpler. The way to lower the activation energy of any given habit is to make the habit simpler to perform. There are a variety of ways that we can do this, but I think the best way to figure out how to simplify your habits is to think about the constraints that you face at that time. And there's a great quote from Stanford psychologist B.J. Fogg about simplicity and habits. I'm going to read it to you now. So Fogg says, "Simplicity is a function of your scarcest resource at that moment. Think about time as a resource. If you don't have 10 minutes to spend and the target behavior requires 10 minutes, then it's not simple. Money is another resource. If you don't have $1 and the behavior requires $1, then it's not simple." So this idea, this concept that whatever the behavior requires and whatever your most constrained resource is, that determines simplicity. So if the behavior requires money and you don't have money, then the behavior is not simple. If the behavior requires you to drive to the gym and you don't have a car to drive to the gym, then the behavior is not simple. So figure out how to either get around that workaround, so how can you perform the habit without money or without driving to the gym, or figure out how to overcome that constraint for that given habit. So what I'd like you to do is to click on the worksheet below, and I want you to just list out what are the constraints that you face when it comes to building the habit that you want to build. What are the different barriers that you're looking at that prevent the habit from being simple? And then in the second box, I want you to try to think of at least 3 ways that you could simplify your habit and overcome those constraints. Go ahead and do that now, and I'll see you in the next lesson.